Strategies. One of the principles behind success is to find somebody who's already successful and model them. And this is what strategies is all about. So welcome to this session. So, as we're on an online class, there's some guidelines. It's great to have interaction. So there's several ways that we can interact. One, if you would like to speak and you have a headset with a microphone, then there's a button where you can raise your hand. I can then unmute you and we can all hear your wonderful voice. The other way that we can interact, you'll see that there's a box there that says write your message here. And what will happen is your question, your comments will pop up. Do be aware that everybody will be able to see your questions and comments. And you may be online and you see that Rosemary's online and you think, Rosemary's great, I've got a burning question I need to ask her. And it may be a private question, even if it's not. Can we keep all questions and comments on track, on topic, please? That'll be great. That'll help everybody online. So, we're starting a series of classes on strategies. Now there's thousands of books on successful people, all telling you what they think they've done, or somebody else telling you what they think they've done to be successful. And I'm sure you brought some of those books and been on some of those courses and tried to follow those steps. But somehow they don't seem to quite work. Not in the way that you was expected anyway. So one of the things I discovered is somebody who is naturally talented often doesn't know how they've got to where they're at. And what then happens through deletion, generalizations and distortions is they tell you what they think they have done rather than what they have done. And I'm sure some of you have gone out and played with some strategies, and as soon as you indicate to somebody that you're modeling them, they do their very best to help you by telling you what they think they do. If only it was that easy. Now, one of the wonderful things around strategies, it enables us to find, at least partially, what somebody's actually doing inside their head rather than what they think that they do. So we're going to start to explore that in the upcoming sessions. And you will find, and for each class, the handouts go out 24 hours beforehand in the members area, a place where you can download these PowerPoints and a PDF. So we'll be using this PDF for these series of strategies. So once it's there, you can pick up that PDF at any point. So, what is it with these strategies? Well, if we think we take the world in through our 5 senses, and we'll probably use that as the raw building blocks to our thinking, we'll also use that certain sequences, the certain step-by-step process in thinking also, i.e. the recipe for somebody's success. Now, if you follow a recipe, you should come out with consistent results, everything being equal. Now, you can have all the components to a recipe, all the ingredients, but if there is something missing, then you're going to have trouble. But if, so let's say we have all the ingredients, but there's also a sequence to the order. So if I'm baking a cake, and this is an example I think a lot of you have heard me talk about. If I'm baking a cake and I put the flour in, I put the, maybe I think it's baking soda, self-raising flour, I melt the 2 bars of chocolate in there, I put a dash of milk, melt the butter in there, mix it all up, put it in the oven for 45 minutes, and then add the eggs. I'm just not going to get a good result. So I've got all the ingredients, but not the sequence. So the way that we sequence information in our head makes a huge difference. Because you can have two people, one who is good at what they do and one that's excellent. In NLP, we ask this question: what is the difference that makes the difference? And quite possibly, it can be the sequence in the way that they think. This will also tie in a whole range of skills that you've been learning for your NLP to be able to do strategy successfully, I should say. So modeling. For you guys that have done the Master Practitioner or think of doing, this is a kind of a great recap, and you'll find that strategies is at the heart of modeling human excellence. So we got this phrase: the map is not the territory, and we often mistake the map for the territory. Another way of putting that: the menu is not the meal. How often have you mistaken the menu for the meal? So you've looked on there, you've seen this wonderful explanation of how succulent, how wonderful, and how tasty this meal is going to be. And when it arrives, it astounds you. It's even more tasty. So here, what we're aiming to do is to create a map that is useful. So if I'm in London and I'm walking and I need to get from Big Ben to Marble Arch, and the only map I've got is a tube map, and yet I'm walking, is that map useful? No. Yet, if I'm going from Big Ben to Marble Arch on the underground, and I've got an underground map, now that makes a difference. Now the underground map, is it an actual representation of all the lines in the underground? Do all the the tube lines actually look like that? What do you think? That's right, they don't. And that was the great insight into creating the iconic map of the tubes. It needed to get the job done. So what we're after is a strategy, a sequence in order of people's thinking that will work for the majority of people. Next we move into having a very clear goal about what you're modeling. This one idea can make or break modeling. You want to know exactly what you're modeling. So one of the examples I tend to use is modeling shopping, because everybody shops. But I'm not actually modeling shopping. My goal is to model how do you pick a piece of clothing that you're pleased with. Right, so the goal to model shopping is actually too big. The goal of how do you pick a piece of clothing that you'll be pleased with is a very clear and concise goal, and makes it a lot easier. So if we're going to do this, and we'll take our example of shopping, before we get to the point where we're going to ask them a lot of questions, one of the things ideally that I would like to do is to go shopping with that person. Spend some time just observing them. I wouldn't really want to interact. So if I'm modeling a public speaker, I will get every piece of video or DVD and go to every live event I can and watch them repeatedly. Now the reason behind that is this: the right brain picks up patterns, picks up a huge amounts of information that sometimes language can't access. So by repeatedly watching the skill that I'm modeling, so for example, if I wanted to model somebody in sales, I'd probably want to watch 10 or 15 interactions with salespeople. If I was modeling a therapist, again, I'd probably want to sit in for 10 to 15 sessions with somebody and just pick up everything, not make any comments, but just be there. And what that does, it builds a pattern of the behavior at an unconscious level. Another word for pattern hunting, intuition. So that's one of the ways that we can start to build this intuition. Here's the thing about people. People will give you huge amounts of information as long as you pay attention. One of the tricks to strategies is to be able to identify relevant patterns that are recurring. You'll pick up just lots of information very quickly. One of the core skills is to be able to find out what's relevant, what actually matters, what's the difference that makes the difference. This will come with time. Once we've got it, we're going to install it and use the strategy. Because if you've done any strategy elicitation, you just know how much work it is. The rewards are great. So we want to use it. And we'll get to that point and we'll talk about how we can install, etc. So this is known as explicit. So developing intuition is a submissive way of learning. It's intuitive, whereas the strategy part is explicit. Okay, so strategies. What we'll be picking up is the sequence and order they're thinking. We are proposing that to be able to do that, we have several skills in place. So we take the one for our 5 senses, we use it as a raw building block of thinking, that creates a sequence and order. We also pick up various information from body language, etc. So, as I think pretty much most people here have actually taken the NLP practitioner, I'm going to ask you, what core skills from the NLP do we think we would need to have mastered to be able to elicit strategies successfully? So what do you think? What are those core skills? So hi Chris. Eye accessing cues. Absolutely. We just want to know and be able to pick up eye accent. So if you haven't done, do start to pick these up, because what's happening is this. We're picking up someone's strategies that order and sequence their thinking. So that'll be both the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. Hey, excellent job, guys. So the distinction that we're going to make, and I first saw this distinction in a book called Magical Sticks and Monsters, no such thing as hypnosis. I think the guy's name is Stephen Helen. Excellent book on hypnosis. And he made a distinction that said the conscious mind's preference shows up for our language, as Rosemary's saying about the VAK language. The unconscious mind's preferences is to be able to pick up the eye accessing cues, pick up unconscious mind's preference, and it's the combination of the two that we're after. So great job. So Karen saying sensory acuity. Absolutely, we want to be there. We want to have our focus on the person. And what we're picking up is shifts in physiology, and often that will tell us that, do we need to just be quiet for a little bit longer? Can we move on? Is there something not, missing from what we're talking about here? Hiya, Chris. And rapport. Yes. Now, this very basic skill within NLP matters probably more than you think it does when you're picking up information from someone else. It's not so much that it is about gaining trust with somebody, because ideally we hope that you've already established that if you're doing face-to-face rapport strategies. The rapport gives you information about what's going on inside somebody else. It enables you to pick up huge amounts very quickly, which is coming slightly back to its intuitive ability, because it activates your right brain pattern hunting. So keep that in mind. There you go. Martin summed those up lovely there. Yes, and then we've got Karen and Rosemary again saying about the representational systems. You need to be able to pick up sensory-based language in a click. So you don't have to think about it, and also categorize the sensory-based language in context, because there's some words that will go across the different representational systems. And then, again, Chris is coming up there with the patterns in language, and this is what we've been talking about. And Renee, absolutely all of them. So notice how important the information is that we learned from the first 2 days. That information matters. So how can we just practice some of these things? Well, let's take the eye accessing cues. Well, initially, what I would suggest is a little bit of software, and at the moment it only works on Windows, that you can download, and it drills you on the different eye accessing cues. Or you spend a day, say, right, today I'm just going to notice people move their eyes. Don't label them, just notice the movements. And then start to go, can I pick up if it's visual? Is it auditory? And just pay attention to just those two. Not that it's constructed, not that it's remembered. Is it just visual? Is it auditory information? And once you get good at that, then say, right, I'm going to pay attention to construction remembered. And then add in kinesthetic and self-talk. And yes, some of the people you'll be following will be left-handed and it may be reversed. Don't worry too much about that. Just pay attention to the movements, and once you've got it, and once you just know those, and that's what the software does for us, you'll be able to spot quite quickly if somebody's cross-wired in any way. So with the VAK language, here's what I suggested you do, and be as tasteful as you can about doing this. Spend the day, say today, I'm going to pay attention to just visual language patterns. And on that day, also introduce or use a word or a phrase that's visually orientated that you don't normally use. And maybe spend 2 or 3 days just on visual. Good places for that are interviews on the radio, because the site's been taken out there. And it has to be a genuine interview, probably not a politician, because they've all been trained to get their point across. So they are well rehearsed. We're looking for genuine interviews. If you're at having coffee in one of these, in Costa's or Starbucks, we have to name them all now, then, and you're sitting there on your own, without being too obvious, and I'm sure you're all people watchers anyway, is listen to people's conversations and start to pick up the sensory-based language. So maybe you do 3 days just on visual, and each day you add in a new word or phrase, and then we switch to auditory. So you're only paying attention to auditory words. I'll learn to speak tonight at some point. Auditory words or phrases. And as soon as you pick one and you notice it, and it's in context, give yourself a pat on the shoulder. Reward yourself like, yes, I've done that. And that little bit of celebration really speeds learning along. And do the same for kinesthetic. And if you can, do some taste and smell as well. You will, in the Western world, especially in England, we don't tend to have a lot of that showing up in our language. But as soon as it does, you'll be on the scent and be able to pick that up. Right, so this is our introduction to this topic online. So we've got about 10 minutes here to the end of the class. What would be great is for me to answer any questions that you may have about strategies, what we've covered tonight, where we're going, etc. So if you would, so as you're thinking of those questions to ask, and this is for me the most interesting part of the classes, because we get this interaction going. So go ahead and type, or if you'd like to talk. Right, so one of the things that Chris is picking up on there is this is a really good diagnostic tool. So what type of client are we talking about here, Chris? Because it depends on the context. So because if it's so it is coaching. Right. So we're then going to find out, so if we want to model how somebody writes their goal. So actually, Chris, let me ask you, do you have a context within coaching that you're thinking about? Okay, so you're happy to share that with us? Great. So I see Martin's got a question there. I'm going to come back to that. What I'd just like to do is just follow this thread through with Chris. Because one of the things you notice here, it is easier to talk about this when we have a topic. Right. So Chris has, if a client models someone else, say how someone organizes their diary. Right, one of the things I would suggest first, Chris, is to model the person you're working with, how they organize their diary at the moment, unless they just don't do it. Because one of the things that we'll be exploring is the tote, and you probably remember the tote, which is test, exit, test, test, operate, test, exit. The first test is the goal, then the operation. So for example, if they start to do the diary but not do it, or don't follow through, then there's several parts that we can model. The other thing is that your client probably won't have the skill level to be able to model. So we're talking about you modeling. Then your goal is to go and find somebody who is good at organizing their diary and model them and bring it back. So the way you'd introduce that to a client is that what you're going to do is discover what people actually do and create a model for them, and then install that process. So Chris has got, so what happens is that the client is not managing their diary well, they spent time with their friends and want to use the same strategy. Right, so that's partly leverage. So what you've said there, which is quite useful, is that they're not managing their diary well. So one of the things I want to be able to do is find out how they are doing it now. Then we can look at the sequence and strategy that they're using inside their heads, and that's okay. Are you having a cup of tea there, Chris? Find the strategies that they actually run at the moment, and it might just need a few tweaking, a few changing at that point. So we can use strategies as a diagnostic tool. Oh, Chris is saying he's using the dictation. Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. A dictation. Now I'm doing it. So what we can do is use the strategies as a diagnostic tool and find out what somebody's doing. Because there'll be certain things that they'll be doing very well and start to tweak that. So the way that I then introduce that is say, right, I'm going to find out how you're running your brain, or I'm going to find out the sequence and order that you're thinking in, to find out at which point we can make some changes. And that's one of the ways that I'll introduce that. Alright, so I'm just going to come back to Martin's observation and then to Stephen's, because we're literally on the last 5 minutes here. Right, so the scale that Karen was great on Sunday, so we had a great day on the skills update day. In her actual modelling project, she pinned it down to certain points, so there's very clear goals along the way. Now, it would create a lot more work because she did lots and lots of clear goals. So yes, it is practical as long as you're prepared to do the work, and Martin will help you get to that point. So Stephen said, presumably there is a danger of picking up mistakes as well. Can you identify and avoid in any way? Yes, and the key to that is this. If you're looking, so for example, for how does somebody manage their diary well, which is one part of it, and then the next part is follow through on those actions, that would be another part. I would model at least 3 people that can produce the same results or have the same skill. And then what you'll find is those 3 people should have something all very similar in between them, and a whole batch of personality stuff which is just them. And that also, by modeling 3 people with the same skill set, and obviously we want to identify what that skill set means and they're at the same level of excellence, then that helps us avoid their mistakes as well. If you model one person, then what's going to happen is you'll pick up personality, you'll pick up their mistakes, you'll pick up the things that don't quite work but have kind of like been jammed into there. So ideally with any skill, it will be 3 people. Wow, look how fast this evening's gone. This is a fascinating topic, and it's one of the core skills. Highly recommend coming back and doing the practitioner when we do the strategies there. For you guys doing the master practitioner, we're going to be spending a lot of time on this to get you so good at it. So next week, for you guys that are interested maybe in doing the master practitioner, whether it's this year or many years down the line, or has already taken the training, please log in. We're going to have a Q&A session. We've got coaching classes next week. We've also got a marketing class, so we've got lots going on. Any of you guys that happen to be in Birmingham this weekend, we're in Birmingham from Thursday, and if you need the address, just let Bernadette know. It'd be wonderful for you guys to pop in. Have a great evening, and I look forward to catching up with you all soon, guys. Thanks for your input. It makes all the difference.